I'm coming to you today from beautiful Port Lincoln on the bottom of Eyre Peninsula in South Australia. We're on holidays, enjoying ourselves. The weather is fabulous, the sky is blue, and the sea is just like silver, like a blue silver. And it's easy to forget for the moment terrible suffering that's taking place in India, the appalling suffering there, and I just hope that more and more of us respond to the need in India. But I want to talk about something a bit closer to home, about another form of suffering that's been taking place quietly in Australia, behind the scenes, in homes, in businesses, and in our halls of Parliament. It has to do with sexual harassment and sexual violence. In recent months, there have been a number of incidents and allegations surrounding Canberra, and the whole issue of sexual violence and its prevalence has become a major issue, a major talking point. And I think many of us realise how many women and girls across Australia suffer terrible things in comparative silence. And it's in that context that I want to make some theological and ethical reflections about this issue, and hopefully a small contribution to the debate. At the moment, the debate in Australia is, well, it's covering many issues, but one of the issues that it's been addressing has been the issue of consent. Now, the issue of consent is actually very complex. It's often tackled from a legal perspective, and what complicates it, of course, is that there are certain conditions, certain requirements, and of course variations. So whilst I would certainly underline and reinforce the importance of consent, consent and in it of itself is only a part of a regime of strategies that need to be implemented to change our culture in relationship to sexual harassment and sexual violence. I want to add to that debate about consent some other issues, some what I think critical issues about relationships and about values. Often the issue of consent comes up because there's a significant minority of men who just don't get it and who seem to feel that they have some entitlement or right to the access of women and girls, that it's somehow their privilege or prerogative to abuse women. It sounds bald when it's put that way, but that's the reality, that for a significant minority of men, the abuse of women is okay. And I'm not sure if discussions about consent, whilst important, is the starting place. And I think, for me, there are some really deeper values that we need to address in this regard. And so in order to do that, what I want to do is reflect upon the ministry of Jesus and his relationship with women, in particular as they're presented in the Gospel of John. There are some remarkable vignettes in the Gospel of John where we get a particular view of women who exemplify certain values, who are held up as exemplars of the faith. And it's the values that they exemplify which I think are important to inject into the current debate in Australia in relationship to sexual violence and sexual harassment. The bottom line with these values is about developing a culture of deep respect where the other person, and in this case the woman or the girl, is valued and treated with the deepest sense of respect possible. And if the other person, if the woman is treated with this kind of regard, this kind of respect, it changes the nature of the relationship and the way that other ethical and social issues are addressed. Now, in the Gospel of John, which is written towards the end of the first century, there are a number of significant women. Now, normally in the ancient world, when women are addressed, it's usually in conjunction with their men. They have a secondary function to their men. So, for example, the household was known as the household of the father, and the woman, in a sense, belonged to that household. She was a secondary figure. This is an era when, of course, in terms of our modern distinctions of sex and gender, when there's only one sex in town, that's the male sex, and a woman is regarded as a derivative or lesser figure. Now, what is remarkable in the Gospel of John is that the significant women, and I'm thinking here of the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4, Mary and Martha, and of course at the end of the Gospel, Mary Magdalene, the significant women are very much free agents. They are autonomous leaders in the community, and they exemplify love, a certain kind of love that is characterized by a generous and deep respect for the other. And when this love is expressed in this way, there is a clarity and transparency about the persons involved and about the relationships. Now, if I'll just come back to the theme of love for a moment. In the Gospel of John, the theme of love is preeminent. Jesus is the bearer of love. In Jesus, the love of God is manifested in the context of being part of the community of Jesus. It will be characterized by love. Now, there are different understandings of love in the ancient world, and this particular view of love is known using the Greek word as agape or agape. It is a kind of a generous or altruistic love. It is a transparent love. It is truthful. It is clear. And it treats the other person with the greatest respect. And by respect, I don't mean just, we can use the word respect loosely and superficially, but this is a deep respect, a deep regard for the other person. Now we see in the Gospel of John, the women get it. The women in the Gospel of John are not secondary or derivative figures in the community. They are leaders. So, for example, in John chapter 4, we have Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well. She's a Samaritan woman. So for Jesus to have a conversation with this woman for a start is shocking. In fact, towards the end of this story, when the disciples rejoin Jesus, as they see Jesus talking to this woman, they're astonished. Verse 27, they're astonished. You know, what on earth is Jesus doing talking to this woman, to a woman, especially a Samaritan woman? Well, this Jesus has just had a very frank discussion with this woman about faith, the source of faith, the value of faith. In the context of that discussion, there's been great transparency between them, transparency about the woman's past. What's interesting is that Jesus knows about this woman's past, but it's brought up in a non-judgmental way, and she's quite transparent. She affirms that Jesus knows the truth about her life. But in this engagement between equals, the woman's life is transformed, and then she becomes a messenger of this faith, this deep faith, this faith of deep respect. She becomes a leader in that community. And in many ways, this sets the pattern for many of the women throughout the gospel. There's the vignette of Martha and Mary with Jesus, who are worried about the healing of Lazarus. Even when all things seem to fail, Martha never gives up on her faith that Jesus can somehow transform Lazarus. And at the very end of the gospel, after the crucifixion, it's Mary Magdalene who encounters the risen Jesus and becomes a messenger. She acts as the first of among many, the first of the apostles. and she brings the good news of the transformed life of Jesus, and that the love, this divine love, has been reborn and is now open and available to all. So there's this pattern in the Gospel of John. And remember, bear in mind that women are secondary figures, but in John, they are leaders. In John, they have significant roles to play. In John, they respond to Jesus with openness, with candor, as equals. Their lives are transformed. They become bearers of this love. And the two qualities of this particular kind of love is an incredible transparency, like, this is who I am. There's no pretense, there's no lying, there are no defenses. This is me, this is life, these are the things that matter. And I will offer to you a deep and lasting respect. That's a critical characteristic of the love in the Gospel of John. It's transparency and respect, truth and regard. They're the important qualities. Now, if we come back now to the world in which we live and the terribly complex issues in relationship to sexual violence and sexual harassment, most Australians are deeply appalled by what is happening, and we do well to encourage the voices of women and girls to speak up and to support them. The more allies, the better. These are really important fundamental issues about society, about relationships, about humanity that have to be addressed. And so there'll be a complex range of strategies and initiatives that need to take place in order to address these things. And the issue of consent, the importance of consent, is one element. What I'm trying to do is come back one step and say, what are the values? What are the things that we bring to any of these discussions? And how do we interpret relationships? From the Gospel of John and the example of these remarkable women, from the woman at the well to Mary Magdalene, we see these women who they've got it. They understand the mission and ministry of Jesus. They are receptive to this radical experience of love, which is expressed in, on the one hand, a truth about relationships, truth about ourselves, and also respect, that the other person is treated with the deepest respect. The other person is seen as sacred, a source of wonder. Now, I'm not saying that these values are easily translated, but it seems to me that this ought to be the starting place, that the other person, and in this instance, the countless women and girls in Australia who have been sexually harassed and violated, the starting point is our regard for them, and in fact for all women and girls, with a deep sense of respect, with transparency. And if all these issues are tackled in this manner, I am sure it will change the outcome. If we're acting with transparency and with truth, there are no defences. We can't play games. We can't live behind certain entitlements or certain privileges. It strips us bare of all defences, and it means that it's about real human beings engaging one with another. The women in the Gospel of John are remarkable women and ahead of their time, and they are exemplars to us of what it means to live a life of truth, a transparent life that treats the other person with the deepest respect, the most profound respect. Surely this is an important starting place for us as Australians as we deal with these complex issues. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen.